Hello humans. Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here. This is the Windmaster lighter made by a company called Brown and Bigelow? I don't know. Bigelow, I think. This is a new old stock. Okay, backstory. I recently went to an estate sale, and the estate sale was for a guy who collected lighters, and he had some really neat stuff in his collection. This is new old stock. It's not entirely complete, but I know it's new old stock because the wick is brand new. Actually, let me open this up. So, the flint wheel is brand new. It actually doesn't have a flint in it, and the wick is brand new, which tells me this is almost certainly new old stock. So, packaging, very, very simple. Cardboard box. Then on the back here, we have our instructions. So, how to fuel it. Pull assembly from case, soak pad with lighter fluid and reassemble, very easy. To change flints, you remove the screw and spring, discard stub of old flint and inset new, turn wheel backwards to smooth new flint, and it says extra flints beneath pad, which I'm not entirely sure what that's going to mean. Important, as flint wears down, turn up screw to retain tension. For a larger flame, pull out more wick, and it has an unconditional guarantee. This isn't going to work anymore. And I know for a fact that the unconditional guarantee isn't going to work anymore because I have documentation of them telling a guy that they're no longer doing lighters and that's not a thing circa 1974. So by 1974 they weren't even giving people catalogs with lighters in them, I don't think that they are going to unconditionally repair or replace my lighter. Which is fine because this one's brand new and it doesn't matter. But I do think that that is kind of funny. That's all we have in terms of documentation out of this particular example, which is kind of neat. So, this is obviously meant to mimic a Zippo lighter. It's very, very similar in many ways to a Zippo lighter. And I will get into that into the part where I review the actual topic itself, or where I take a look at the lighter itself. But first, we're going to really quickly look at Brown and Bigelow, however that's pronounced. So they're founded in 1896 by Hiram Brown and Herbert Bigelow as a promotional items company, primarily making calendars. They worked with plenty of artists. They are actually some of the people who started off Marilyn Monroe's career with a spread, which she was paid $50 for, which is what most of the information on this company's history seems to be, unfortunately. It's actually kind of difficult to find a detailed account of their history. But anyway, they started off in Minneapolis. They're still in Minneapolis. The company still exists to this day, still making promotional items. But they held, at various points in time, they've held a lot of patents. They've done a lot of stuff both in and outside of the promotional item space. They've held industrial patents, coating patents, patents for machinery to test the springiness of sheet steels and stuff. They've had an insane number of patents, everything from industrial equipment to they have a paperclip patent, multiple pens and pencil patents, tons of lighter patents, lots of different stuff. So they started making lighters in the late 1920s, and as far as I can tell, they stopped sometime in the late 60s. That's when all of their patents for lighters expire, is sort of into the late 60s, early 70s by and large. Like I said, here's an example from September of 1974, where they're telling a guy that they just don't make lighters anymore. Huge thank you, by the way, to the Lighter Library for providing a lot of the resources I'm going to use here. Not all of them, but a lot of the resources I'm going to use here I got from the Lighter Library. Super cool website if you're interested in lighters. Very, very useful source of information. Now, this lighter itself says patents pending on it, and we're going to try and date this. And dating these has proven to be a little bit difficult, but I think I can get fairly close. Not perfect, but I think I can get fairly close. So, the only patent that I can tell, I went through all the patents that they hold, and the only patent that I can tell directly applies to this particular lighter is US 2796629. The numbers should be on screen, as should the actual first, the drawings page of the patent. You can find it on Google Patents. The US Patent Office has it up. There's places to find patents if you want to look for patents. But it's a patent for the hinge mechanism itself. The actual mechanism by which this hinge works, because it is actually different from a Zippo, notably. Let me pull out my Zippo here. That's not a Zippo. That's something else for a future video. Okay. So as you can see, Zippo is just an exterior hinge with sort of this spring-operated lever arm. What this has is actually a flat spring at the bottom, and it uses this pin up here and a stable point. So at this point right here, there's no spring tension on the flat spring at the bottom, but as soon as you try and open or close it, you can hear that's when there's spring tension, which is kind of an ingenious solution to the problem, not gonna lie. But that is, as far as I can tell, the only patent that applies to this, and that patent was applied for in 1954 and then granted in 1957. So, and I know later, I have seen later examples where it says US patent number or patents, patent protected, stuff like that. So I do know that this is almost certainly from between those years. And this company, Soho, which is a brief backstory on them too, because why not? Soho is the Ohio Standard Oil Company. It was formed after the breakup of the Standard Oil Trust in 1911. It was eventually sold to BP in 1987. This particular Soho logo fell out of use in 1962 with the circle and the up and down arrows. That fell out of use in 1962, which likely means that this is from that time period. I am fairly confident in the statement that this was made somewhere between 1954 and 1957. And as we can see with this right here, they did do different models. There's several differences between these two. Most notably, this older model does not have a guard that goes over the flint wheel, whereas this particular example actually notes the guard as a selling feature. Still has an asbestos wick though in the updated version, which is super fun. There's a couple of other differences. If I'm feeling smart and I have enough time when I'm doing the edit, there'll be arrows pointing back and forth, pointing out the differences, but for now I'm just going to mention that there are other differences. I know that the updated version has a back spring to hold tension, whereas the older version has this detent, which, again, we're just stealing everything from Zippo's bag of tricks. Zippo also uses a detent on both sides, but they just use a detent to friction fit. This is, in terms of design, this actually works a little bit differently from Zippo, and I think it's clever in a couple of ways. So, first and foremost, you have to remember that Brown and Bigelow, the company, is very specifically designing and making marketing equipment. They want something that they can slap a logo on. And to that end, the actual interchangeable part of this is a very, very simple stamped piece of sheet metal. It's very light. I actually think this is most likely aluminum. There's no way in hell this is steel. Yeah. I'm fairly certain this is actually aluminum. Very, very light piece of material that you can very easily print onto. And then this piece right here is just standard. It goes across. And typically with Zippos, what you see in terms of like talking about them and buying them from the company, you have the Zippo and you have Zippo inserts. Two separate ideas, right? But this right here is, generally speaking, the Zippo product. And then this is your standard Zippo insert, or you'll have butane Zippo insert, or you'll have pipe Zippo insert, or whatever Zippo insert you have. With the, I'm just going to call it the Windmaster. With the Windmaster lighters, what you get instead is this product right here. This is the lighter. And then this is your interchangeable piece. Very small, very easy to interchange. And if you're working with a bunch of different companies and you're basically just stamping, printing, painting, whatever their logo onto stuff, you can mass produce this. You can make, if you know you're dealing with 50 different clients that are each going to need their own separate one, you can make 100,000 of this particular piece because it's interchangeable across all of them. And it lowers the cost for your consumer because this doesn't have a hinge. doesn't have moving parts. You don't need to fit stuff together. The actual interchangeable part of this isn't specialized to any given company. Whereas what you get with Zippos is sometimes the hinge has to be painted. Sometimes the hinge has to be a certain color or a certain look or whatever else, right? So it actually does benefit the manufacturing process to do it like this, which is kind of clever. Yeah. So this right here is your interchangeable piece. Nice and simple. This is our pad. We're going to have to get something in there to lift it up. What do I have handy to lift? I have a knife. So we're just going to lift up this pad. I'm fairly certain it's a standard cotton pad. I'm not 100%. Oh wow, did this used to be a flint? I'm assuming that it used to be a flint before it deteriorated. It's kind of gross. Anywho, nanny. So again, this is new old stock. And I have time. I'm going to go on a little bit of a thing. A lot of collectors do not like modifying new old stock. They do not like using new old stock. And I completely understand that perspective. You want to preserve it for future generations. And that is totally fair and understandable. That is not me. I like having the ability to use things. Not everything in my collection gets a lot of use. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't have any safe queens that don't. But for me personally, there's a lot of value in actually being able to use the things that I purchase. So from where I'm standing, I'm going to use this. I'm going to light it up. I'm going to experiment with it. All that's going to be after the video. This is very much just kind of history, neat thing. But if you're a collector out there who's saying, oh no, it's new old stock, why are you ruining it? I'm not in it for the value. I am in it for my personal value of things, which is not the same as the monetary value all the time. I want this to work. So I'm going to make it work. Oh, yeah. Cotton pad. Actually, I should probably be wearing a mask. This is an asbestos wick, by the way. The actual pads, I believe, are cotton. It'd be very weird if they weren't, but the actual wick on this is asbestos, so I might be dying now. Amazing. Okay, so here we have, and it does just take a very standard Zippo flint, Ronson flint, whatever. Whole assembly goes in like that. Oh wow, that flicked up immediately. That's got a hell of a fling. So some of the advertising probably said that the wick is adjusted to factory standard. I actually think that this might say it right here. No, it doesn't. The wick is adjusted to factory standard. This is a hell of a flame for a factory standard. It's not as satisfying of a flick as the Zippo. It takes a lot more intentionality to it. It feels more solid, but it is definitely a heavier. The wind guard does seem pretty good. Like, that's actually pretty impressive. But yeah, it produces a really nice flame. That's actually really nice. Another detailing note, there is a little bit of, there's these texture bumps up here, which make it a little bit easier to open. That's nice. Wow, that throws a flame. That's, I might start collecting these. That's actually really, really satisfying. So, yeah, I mean, it works. It's very easy to use. It's got a very large flint wheel with a lot of access to it, which makes it very easy to flick. Has a very protected area for the wick itself, which makes that it's very, very good for, one, wind protection, obviously. But more importantly, it's actually easy to use on stuff, which is kind of nice. I will say the lid is heating up fairly noticeably. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but the lid is definitely heating up a little bit, which is a little unfortunate, but not the end of the world. Refilling it, nice, simple. Putting new flints in, nice, simple. Let's do a side-by-side comparison. Give me 1 second. I forgot to grab my older lighters for the comparison. So, all right. There it is next to a Zippo. It's a little bit taller. It's not very much taller, but it is a little bit taller than the Zippo. And next to a old school Ronson. I'm gonna forget what this thing is called. That actually makes me really sad. The name of the Ronson should be on screen right now. But Delight. It's the Ronson Delight. And a Ronson Delight, here it is in terms of thickness. It is a little bit thicker, but because of how small these things are, it is actually noticeably thicker in the hand. It feels much more hand-filling. And it's about the same width. So it'll fit nicely in like the change pocket on a pair of jeans, or the watch pocket, which is what it was technically intended for when it was originally patented, as you can tell if you read the original patent. And here it is next to just a standard Bic lighter. As you can see, it's shorter than a Bic lighter. It's going to be, oh, not quite. It's not quite wider than a Bic lighter, but yeah. It's kind of cool. The biggest place where you will notice the difference between it and a Zippo in terms of size is actually open. It looks a hell of a lot chunkier. And it feels a hell of a lot chunkier, which is kind of nice. That's fucking pleasant to use. I'm actually, having actually lit it now, because again, this was new old stock at the start of this video. That was my first time ever lighting it. Having actually lit it now, I am deeply impressed. That's really nice. Wow. Yeah. Super, super cool. A little bit of history there. A lot of different companies have their name stamped on these, so you get to see a lot of variation in the ones that are out there. And a lot of different people therefore collect them for a lot of different reasons, right? Like if you're somebody who's super interested in the history of Standard Oil, you might want this because it is a Standard Oil company of Ohio. Promotional product. If you're interested in some of the other products that they did, other companies that they did promotional items for, you might be interested in collecting these for those different companies, right? So there is a huge amount of variation, as you would kind of expect. For me personally, I'm in it for the lighter itself, not so much the case that they put it in. Don't get me wrong, the Soiho logo is pretty nice looking, and this brushed aluminum base is very pretty, and I think it does look really good all put together. It is a fingerprint magnet, but it looks really good all put together. But that is not going to be enough for me to be like, oh yeah, I have to have this, you know? I'm in it because the lighter was cool. It's also worth noting that there's no promotional for the lighter itself on the outside. Once you open it up, there's the Windmaster with the copyright logo. And once you actually pull it out of the marketing material, you get the rest of the information. But when it's closed, this is a very clean look, which is pretty damn sweet. Yeah. Overall, I'm deeply impressed. If you collect lighters, this is a really cool example. It feels weightier, chunkier, more hand-filling, just a bit more than a Zippo is. The action's nice. It's not... I don't think that this lid gets out of the way enough. And it can be a little finicky, like it likes getting stuck right there. Which is a little bit unfortunate, but it does make a nice sound, so there is that going for it. I don't think that the lid gets far enough out of the way, because like I said, it does heat up a decent amount when the lighter is actually going. Flame looks good. It takes a decent amount of fuel, and I mean, a certain amount of it's going to evaporate off anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Internally, this is very, very similar to a Zippo. A lot of promotional lighters at this time period were very similar to a Zippo, for obvious reasons. Zippo sold extremely, extremely well. It's kind of interesting. You can see, like, promotional items, generally speaking, when it comes to lighters, sort of follow one of three paths. They're either Ronson clones, with that very, very particular geared Ronson action, that action right there, or a modification of it. Ronson did their own internal modifications of it. It's a Zippo clone with the internal cartridge, body, flick wheel, or they're a Bic clone later on. Technically this predates the Bic, but this is an old IMO that's going to be on my chopping block at some point soon. This is a more modern stick. Promotional one that's part of a different video that I'm working on, but they're always one of those three, generally speaking. And I just think it's kind of cool seeing the different interpretations of how to do the thing. Yeah, that's kind of all I had to say on the subject. I think this is super, super cool. And if you're into lighters, this is one to pick up. It's a very interesting kind of offshoot of the Zippo branding, not Zippo branding, but the Zippo design philosophy. And I think it's a pretty clever piece of both history, marketing history, and just lighters in general. So if you see one of these at a good price, absolutely pick it up. It's super sweet. It feels very robust and durable. And they're not rare, but they're not super common either. So it's an interesting piece to have in your collection, if nothing else. That's kind of all I had to say on the matter. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.